The Britishers tried to stop this man. They even arrested him twice, but they couldn't. He diligently fought for India's independence and played a key role in achieving it. Who is he? He is the President of India. Hello folks, today on Behind the Date, we will talk about Rajendra Prasad, India's first president, and dive deep into his life, his politics, and his contribution to the country. We will also talk about his relationship with Gandhi, his involvement in India's independence movement, and so much more. Not only was he India's first president, but also one of the most prominent Congress leaders of all time, and this video will show you why. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was one of the most influential figures in India's struggle for independence from British rule. He was a leading lawyer, politician, and social reformer, and he served as the first president of India. Born in Ziradeh, in the Siwan district of Bihar, Prasad was the ninth and youngest child of Mahadev Sahai, a scholar of Sanskrit, and Kamleshwari Devi, who died when Prasad was just a kid. Prasad's parents were deeply religious, often narrating stories from Hindu scriptures to their children. Growing up, Prasad was a brilliant student and was also awarded a scholarship to the Calcutta Presidency College, where he studied philosophy, history, political science, and economics. His interest in politics began during his college days, and soon he started to actively involve himself in the Indian independence movement. During this time, he also helped develop some of India's most prominent organizations that became breeding grounds for some of the leading politicians in Bihar and India. Prasad was deeply patriotic and was highly intelligent. Many of those who encountered him were enamored and motivated by him, and these attributes were not overlooked. He, like many others, was motivated by a figure on a mission to change India's fate, and when that leader called him to join, there was no doubt about what Prasad would do. Mahatma Gandhi was a major influence on Rajendra Prasad's thoughts and actions. Prasad was an ardent follower of Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence and ahimsa. He was inspired by Gandhi's vision of a free India based on religious harmony and mutual respect. Prasad was moved by Gandhi's insistence on the importance of self-reliance and self-sufficiency, and admired the way Gandhi had used non-violent tactics to bring about political change, and was inspired to use them himself. Prasad also adopted Gandhi's approach to social reform, including his opposition to the caste system and his support for the removal of untouchability. Prasad began his profession as a teacher before becoming a lawyer. He was a very accomplished lawyer, but after attending one of Gandhi's meetings, he resigned from his high-paying career to completely dedicate himself to the Indian independence struggle. Prasad quickly rose to become one of the most powerful members of the Indian National Congress. He was a key figure in the Salt March of 1930, which was also known as the Dandi March and the Dandi Satyagraha, an act of non-violent civil disobedience in colonial India led by Gandhi to protest British rule in India. It was a 24-day march that began on March 12, 1930, when Gandhi and 78 followers began marching 240 miles, 387 kilometers, from Ahmedabad to Dandi, Gujarat, to make salt from seawater in defiance of the British Salt Act, which had imposed a heavy tax on salt production by Indians. The march resulted in the arrest of nearly 60,000 people, including Gandhi and Rajendra Prasad, and it eventually led to the repeal of the Salt Act on April 1930. In 1934, Prasad was elected as the president of the annual session of the Indian National Congress, which allowed him to play a very hands-on role in the Quit India movement, another civil disobedience movement launched in August 1942 in response to Mohandas Gandhi's call for immediate independence. The movement was led by Gandhi and the All India Congress Committee and aimed at putting pressure on the British government to grant India immediate independence. The movement was largely non-violent and involved protests, marches, and strikes. the British government once more tried to curb the protests by arresting most of the Congress leaders, including Rajendra Prasad. But these civil disobedience movements and many other such acts of defiance worked, as after just 5 years, India became independent in 1947. Prasad became the first Minister of Food and Agriculture in the central government and was appointed as the President of the Constituent Assembly, which overlooked the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution. The election of India's first president was a historic event that marked a major milestone in India's journey to becoming a democratic nation. It was the culmination of a long process that began with the independence of India from British rule in 1947. The Constitution of India provided for an executive president as the head of state and a prime minister as the head of government. The election of the president was to be conducted by an electoral college composed of elected members of the state legislatures and the union territories. The electoral college was to select 2 candidates, one of whom would be elected as the president. After the Constitution was adopted, Rajendra Prasad was made the President of India because there was no competition at the time. But in 1952, that was not the case. Prasad had to contest the election, and to everyone's elation, he still won with a majority of the votes in the Electoral College. He held the office for 5 years and was re-elected for a second term in 1957. During his tenure as president, Prasad worked to strengthen the democratic institutions of India and helped to foster economic development. He also worked to improve relations with other countries and sought to promote India's place in the international community. The election of India's first president marked the beginning of a new era in India's history. It was the beginning of a process of democratization that would eventually lead to the development of a strong and independent nation. As he had already played a key role in developing India's constitution, he knew the goals and the vision of the newfound state. He laid the foundation for India's modern educational system and championed the rights of the poor and disadvantaged. He also supported the growth of the Indian economy and worked to promote the development of science and technology in India. He was a strong advocate for regional cooperation and promoted peace initiatives between India and its neighbors. The Indian people had immense respect and admiration for Prasad, and the Indian government honored him with Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian award in the country. Rajendra Prasad, after 12 years of serving the nation, retired from his post at the age of 70, but his retired life didn't last long, as he passed the following year at the 70 age in 1963. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was an influential figure in India's struggle for independence. He was a great nationalist and an ardent advocate of nonviolence and social justice. He was also a brilliant lawyer and an able politician who steered India in the right direction when he became the first president of the country. Prasad's legacy of service and leadership will be remembered for generations to come. Also, as we talked about first in this video, we do recommend watching our previous one on India's first female president and the controversies that followed. It's intriguing, inspiring, and shocking.